So here we are tonight, all coming here from your daily activities and whatever they may have been. And no doubt, as usual, they are leaving an imprint, maybe, of thoughts, emotions, whatever. We usually process these continuing even after the activity is over. So bearing that in mind, the imprint of your own day and your activities, and also, of course, the news, which we've all been following, I'm sure, the wildfires in California, which is a heartache for everyone. And maybe some of you who have relatives and family there. And perhaps there's just a lot of grief that's going on right now. Certainly there is in the nation. And there's everything else. We all know all of the things that weigh so heavily on us, even when we don't think about it. And that's just the very wars and cruel trade violence in the world. Also here at home, things that are going on here. So I think maybe right now, when we think about these things, one thing we can do is offer appreciation to this beautiful land that we have and to the people who were stewards here before we came here, the Monacan Nation. So we're on unceded territory right now. Beautiful territory. Bearing all of this in mind, keeping all of this in mind right now, let us focus on really arriving right here, right now. We're going to start tonight, as usual, with a meditation. And I'm going to invite you to really come here and arrive. Bearing all the things in mind and heart that we are and do, and knowing that we, like people before us, and no doubt those who come after, have hearts that are big enough to hold all of this, all of these difficulties, heartaches. We can hold it. Hearts have done it throughout history. And we can hold it when we become present. That's the only time. Becoming present. Right here, right now. Wherever you are, whether you're here in this sanctuary, whether you're at home or somewhere else, inviting you just to really arrive here. Right at this moment, this is your place in the universe. And I invite you to close your eyes. We close our eyes because this is a way to really become present. Otherwise, the eyes distract us, and what we see, our perceptions distract us. This is your place, wherever you are, is here. Here. Let us truly be here now. I invite you to take 2 long, slow in-breaths. Breathing in and letting the breath go down to the belly, and breathing out. Second long, slow breath, and exhale. Allowing your tensions to, the knots to unknot and the tensions to release somewhat. And also arriving here in your body. Being aware. You're sitting in a pew, those of you who are here, wherever you are at home or anywhere else. Becoming aware of your body, how it feels, the seat in the chair or the pew, on a cushion if that's where you are. Your back, if it's bolstered against the back of the pew or a chair. Noticing. Right now, what is the experience of your back? And your feet on the floor. Taking your attention into your feet, letting it rest there for a minute. And what about your hands? Moving your attention to your hands and noticing the experience of your hands. Maybe they're touching each other, or perhaps they're on in your lap, on your thighs, wherever. What is the experience of your hands? And for a moment, just now allowing your attention to kind of stop it at whatever point in your body that it does stop, and notice maybe it's a pain. What does it feel like, that pain? Not just an ouch. What does it feel like as an ouch? Coming in contact with it if it's there. Or maybe there is a sense of relief and release as you sit here and arrive here. Perhaps already there is a sense of some lightness. Now turning your attention from your body, turning it inward. Going inward to the still place. The poet Rumi says, outside the freezing desert night, this other night inside grows warm, kindling. Let the landscape be covered with a thorny crust. We have a soft garden here. The continents blasted, cities and little towns, everything. The news we hear is grief for the future. But the real news inside here is there's no news at all. And you rest in or near that place. Rest your attention in or near that place where there's no news at all. Exploring. Turning deeply inward, just for now. Deeply inward. Stepping back from thoughts and emotions. You know, they still may be there, thoughts and emotions. Let them. Let thoughts and emotions do what they do. In a way, they play tag with each other, one after another. It's not a problem. Just allow your attention to step back from them to a stiller place, a quieter place. Relaxing. Resting in that stillness or the quietness, even while thoughts, emotions do their things, we do not have to latch onto them. We don't have to follow them. They don't have to be stilled or quiet or evaporate. Just being here, just for now. And now I invite you, allow your attention to move to your breath. And imagine, intend to breathe in love as though the air were love, which in fact it is. Breathe in love. And on the exhale, exhale the love that is within you. Breathing in love and breathing out. This is the breath of love. Whatever else may be true for you, right now, in this meditation, breathing the breath of love in and out. Loving for anyone and everyone. Loving for everything and anything. Without limits. And so simply. The breath of love. The ancient Taoist master Lao Tzu said there's no need to run outside for better seeing, nor to peer from a window. Rather, abide at the center of your being, for the more you leave it, the less you learn. Search your heart and see if he is wise who takes each turn. The way to do is to be. The way to do is to be. When Lao Tzu says is the center of your being and outside the center of your being, recognizing thoughts and emotions are outside the center of your being. The center of your being is quiet, is stillness. It's your essential nature. Relaxing into your basic essential nature. Returning home to yourself and the center of your being. And breathing the breath of love. Inhaling love and exhaling. The poet Rumi says, when I run after what I think I want, my days are a furnace of stress and anxiety. If I sit in my own place of patience, what I need flows to me and without pain. From this, I understand that what I want also wants me, is looking for me and attracting me. There is a great secret here for anyone who can grasp it. There is a great secret here for anyone who can grasp it. The great secret. Have you found it? I know some of you have. There's no need to look for it. It's right there when you're quiet, when you step back into the universal love that you naturally are. Breathing the breath of love. The poet Hafiz says, "Now is the time to know that all you do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truth with yourself and God? Now is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you can finally live with veracity and love." Hafiz is a divine envoy whom the beloved has written a holy message upon. My dear, please tell me, why do you still throw sticks at your heart and God? What is it in that sweet voice inside that incites you to fear? This is the time for you to deeply compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. Now is the season to know that everything you do is sacred. This isn't just a poem, it's a prayer, a prayerful meditation on universal love. And it certainly is a recognition of or a longing for what you already are, what each of us already is, and that is love, our nature. We are the love that we long for, and it is looking for us. Breathing the breath of love. Breathing love on the inhale and love on the exhale. You don't have to feel a warm and fuzzy feeling. This is about your intention. This love is not about being warm and fuzzy or emotional. It's much quieter than that and more basic. It's you. The breath of love. Love without condition. It is your nature for all the conditioning and the emotions, the education, and all the things of our experience that are piled on top. Deep down, it's love without condition. Rumi says, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds meet. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. As we bring this meditation toward a close, I invite you to hold in mind and in heart, hold love in mind and heart, and offer the breath of love, if you feel you are able to those human beings and non-human beings in Southern California who are suffering, and to their loved ones wherever they may be. The breath of love. And let us offer love to beings everywhere who are suffering, wherever they may be, human and non-human. and to yourself, who is often the last being we would think or wish to offer love to. Offering love to yourself. And to any other individual, person, or group that you wish to. And finally, I invite us to offer love to future generations, whatever they may be facing. Love now to those in the future. Thank you. So I'd like to invite you to remember this breath of love. You can do it at any time. I mean, we breathe, right? 24/7. Why not make it a breath of love? It's amazing what it can do for your day, what it can do for you. So that's an invitation. And now let's see, it's 7:42. So we will meet again at about 8 minutes. That's 10 minutes, 7:52. And in the meantime, we're going to take a break. Rebecca has very kindly made cookies for us that look lovely. They're sitting right over there. So enjoy. I'll ring a bell when we're coming back. So for this talk, I've named this talk "Be Full of Love." And to begin with, I'll say that there are two forces that bring us to spirituality. And one is being pushed, and the other is being pulled. We're pushed into spiritual practice and pulled into spiritual practice. And I think we're pushed by suffering. When we're suffering, we want something, like just about anything, that's going to help relieve the suffering. And for that, Buddhism is really effective. I mean, that's the first four noble truths, right? First noble truth is suffering in life. And 2, 3, and 4, the cause of suffering, the origin of suffering, and how to relieve suffering. We have found here, many of you know so very well how Buddhism has been effective. It works to help us reduce suffering, to see it in a new light. So that's the push of suffering, all those wonderful tools that we know. And then there is the pull of spiritual life. And kind of being drawn to it, I think, is another way of expressing it. There is a sense that many of us feel, and maybe you do, that somehow or another, in looking around at our daily life, that there's a hole in our culture, like something that you're yearning for, and that is not supplied in the culture around us. And right now, I don't know if some of you resonate with that, but I will tell you, I certainly felt that. I felt I was looking for something that was sacred, something sacred. I couldn't put a name to it, but I knew that it was there. And as I said, maybe you do too. So I'd like to point out that both of these, I think most people feel maybe one more than the other, but you can feel both of them together. And both of them are important. Both of them can lead us and are doorways into truth. It's not like one is right and one is wrong, or one is better and one is worse. They're just two different things. And also, I will say, they meet, actually. If you identify with being pushed by suffering, and this is the reason why you are in spiritual practice, the deeper you go, the more you will find, and the Buddha's path, this path is known as a wisdom path, a path of wisdom. You will find that it also leads to a path of love. And those who are pulled and drawn by spiritual practice, and there's some traditions that really strongly emphasize it, like the Sufi. We've talked about some of that Sufi tradition, and I read some Sufi poets in our meditation. Those lead to wisdom through love. So it's not like it's one or the other. It is both, and they can merge. But for sure, I think some of us feel one more strongly than the other, or at different times in our life. So a couple of things for tonight. What I wanted to do is I'm going to talk about Buddhism, because although the push of suffering is predominant and clear, implicit in this tradition is the pull, is love. It's implicit. The Buddha didn't say it that way. He didn't speak it, but it is very much present in the tradition. So I think these days, we're experiencing such dark days for many of us. We live in a time of drastic change, uncertainty, and we live in a culture that is highly scientific and technologized and digitalized and secular. I think it's really important in these times that we affirm our humanity and all that that means. The intrinsic aspects of our humanity, I think we need to acknowledge that. And that is where the pull of love is really important, because that's what it's about. It's about it's about our human nature and our humanity and our love. I think we need in these days to support ourselves in every way we can. And I think the pull of love needs to be recognized and acknowledged, and its role in Buddhism experienced, recognized. So we turn there for support, to Buddhism for support. And as I said, I think we need to realize that love is a big part of it. It's not something we usually talk about in that way. And by the way, when I said we don't usually talk about love, of course you've been here any number of times, have heard us. Loving kindness is a big part of our practice, right? It's a big part, an important part, but it's not the same. Loving kindness is a quality we cultivate. It's one of the 4 heart qualities. We cultivate it. But the love that we're talking about now, the universal love, is already present. You don't cultivate it. You simply touch into what's already there. So there's a difference. There's a difference between the two. I guess I'll say, I'm convinced, I don't want to get too much off the subject, but I'm convinced that this is what the Buddha had in mind to begin with. To cultivate loving kindness, at some point he felt that we would touch in to what was already there. Just the same, which was love, universal love. And he didn't say it in that way. Not the way Buddha spoke, but I think that was what was a up his sleeve, you might say. So what I want to do tonight is I'm going to talk about love and how it is implicit universal love in Buddhism. And what I'm going to do is to begin with my story. Actually, I'm going to be telling two stories tonight. One is mine and one is the Buddha's. Okay, I'm not asking you to decide which is more important, but it just seemed to me that mine will bear on it, and then we'll talk about the Buddhist. So I'll say I began in Buddhism back in the 1980s. So it's before some of you were born, I think. Nonetheless, that's when I began, and I started out in Zen. I joined a Zen group in Germantown, Maryland, called the American Zen College. And we met on Saturdays and did a couple of meditations every Saturday morning, and also a talk by the Zen master, who was a Korean teacher, a Korean from Korea, and he gave a talk. So I attended that, and toward the end of the 1980s, I divorced. Had been married, and I moved out to Germantown to be close to that Zen center, because that's where I had developed a community of friends. And so that's where I was. And when I moved there, I also took part in the Saturday morning sessions. Not Saturday morning, weekly, daily sessions. Every day, except Saturday, we had that special group. Every other day, there was very early morning sessions in which the Zen master, this is before work, there were just a few of us there. We'd go to the Zendo, which was a beautiful place. That's the Zen meditation hall. And the Zen master would chant, and he would beat on what's called a muktak. A muktak is a Korean. It is a wooden fish, and it kind of makes a sound clunk, clunk, clunk. And he would beat that to the chant. And while those of us who were there would bow. And in Zen, you did traditionally, if you could, 108 bows. And I was young enough at that time, I could. And in Zen, a bow is a complete prostration, and then the special certain way in which you do your hands. So I loved those early morning sessions because it was before work, when the day was fresh. It was quiet. Zen hall, the Zendo was beautiful. And it just felt this sense of what was sacred, felt was right there. So I did that. And at the same time, during these years, I read intensively in Zen, some of the books, many of the books. In about year 8, and about the 8th year I was there, I came across a book called The Unborn by a Zen master, Japanese, who lived, I don't know, a few hundred years earlier, named Bankei. And the book was called The Unborn, which was one of the words that the Buddha used to refer to that which is. We're calling it today, we're calling it universal love. But there's so many other names for it. And we use them sometimes. Buddha nature is another one. Consciousness, being, pure being, emptiness, the word that so many of us have a problem with. You know, these just words. They're words to speak what can't be spoken. They're words pointing to what can't be spoken. But I think it's important to recognize love. Universal love is one of them. Buddha didn't talk about it. I'll get to that. Anyway, so I was reading this book, The Unborn, and I really liked it a lot. And at the same time, I suddenly realized, you know what? He doesn't talk about love. Bankei didn't talk about love. Here I'd been in Zen for 8 years, training pretty intensively, and I had not realized that that was missing. But, you know, I think all of you know from your own experience, training, that you evolve, things change. And that's what happened for me. I was evolving, and all of a sudden I realized I had gotten into Zen to begin with when I knew nothing about it, but I knew in my heart that it was about love in the way that I wanted. It was about love and something that was sacred. It was what I was looking for, even before I knew it specifically. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I have been listening to Dharma talks for years now and reading books. And all of a sudden I realized they're not talking about love. And that seemed really important to me. I wanted to hear it that way. And I think some of you maybe can relate. Not everybody. Everybody has different ways of getting into this. For me, that was one way that was important. And I hadn't realized that I hadn't really heard it that way. So we put out a little newsletter, our group. And I decided, okay, so I'm going to write an article for our newsletter. And I did. And I called it Love and the Unborn, in which I connected the two. And I gave it to, the Zen master was Gosung Shin. I gave it to Gosung. And he said he liked the article, except for one minor change. He deleted the crucial sentence that linked love and the unborn. And to me, that made the whole article worthless. It was just, it missed the whole point. So I said, never mind, just don't publish it. And he didn't. But that started me on really a deep sense of questioning. You know, why doesn't he talk about love? And I'm talking universal love. And do I belong in Zen? That's what I was questioning. It really felt important. Felt so important. I questioned, maybe I need to change and switch out of this tradition. And this was a big deal for me because, as I said, I'd been there 8 years. These were my friends. This is my community, my spiritual practice. And moreover, I had been ordained. I am a Zen lay priest. So all of these things, it made it a big deal. So I didn't talk about it. I certainly didn't tell Gosung about it. But I will tell you now, he read thoughts. I knew that he did. I mean, I'd seen it before, and I'm pretty sure in this case he did. You'll hear why. But anyway, I didn't talk about it. One morning I went out to Front Royal, where I knew that there was a community of Paramahansa Yogananda. Some of you have read his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, his Self-Realization Fellowship Society. So I went out there and was thinking, okay, maybe that's what I need to get into. I knew that they talked about love in a whole different way. Maybe that's what I need to get into. So I went out there to just see what it felt like. And I came back, and I was in turmoil. I hadn't made up my mind. And the next morning, I went back to the morning session, and we did our regular, he did his chanting and so forth, and bowing, and then meditation. And after meditation period, he came up to me, he said, leave and don't come back. Oh, so friends, this is a different culture. This was Korean. It was East Asian. The shock that many of us feel here, because we are in a very westernized, Americanized, and beautifully thoughtful and psychologically just skillful tradition. Zen, particularly with an East Asian Zen master, had a very different cultural setting. And what I think is so interesting about the reaction I knew you were going to have, because I thought about it and realized the gap. And it's so interesting to see to bear in mind the complexities of translating something from one culture to another. And Buddhism, the Buddha, we could talk about 2,400 or 500 years ago, totally different culture. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Anyway, so he told me, leave and don't come back. And I was angry, and I said, okay, I will. And I had a beautiful Zen robe. I left it on my cushion, and I walked out. And I still hadn't decided about Self-Realization Fellowship. I took some time. I did decided Self-Realization Fellowship was not for me. So what I did was I waited a couple of months till intuitively I felt it was timely. I could call Kosung and see if I could come back. I did that. He said, sure. I came back. We never talked about the rupture. And he never mentioned it again. Again, East Asian. This is not the least bit surprising to me. Here in our first of all, we would never tell anybody, leave and don't come back. It's unthinkable. And moreover, anytime there is a mistake, we try to talk about it. We have even committees or whatever. It's a different thing. That's all I'll tell you. But well, I won't say more. I can go on and on about the cultural differences. So I did come back and I stayed there for a few months, but actually what happened, and I was very happy to be back and with my friends, but shortly, not too long after that, I left and went to live in a Zen monastery in Shasta Abbey and for a couple of years. I guess I'll just jump ahead. After that, other things happened. I won't go into all of that. I'm going to cut my story short, except to say I did live in another monastery. Why? Because I was trying to find out whether I needed to, I feel into whether I should ordain. And my decision was no, I was not going to do that. But, and the point I'm making right now by jumping ahead like that, is that it was felt so important to me to bring the sense of what was sacred, which I so much felt at Shasta Abbey for one thing, and bring it into daily life. I was going to live in daily life, but I felt that the sacred, which I'd been longing for when I first went into Zen and didn't know what in the world it was about, that's what I wanted to do. So that, in essence, is my story. Let's see where. So now to switch over to Buddhism and to our tradition, the insight tradition. And I said that, and I think you can recognize, you haven't heard us often talk about universal love here. It just, we frame it, it's framed differently because that's the way the Buddha did it. He framed it differently. We, in our Western culture, have talked often and value universal love. The religions of the book, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three of them have this component of universal love. And as you heard in this meditation I guided, I was quoting Sufi masters mainly. That is just a tradition of love and the beloved. Well, it's missing. It's not what the Buddha's culture was when he lived. Of course, love existed in ancient India 2,400 years ago. It's wherever we human beings are. But it wasn't prioritized in any way. There were other things that were more important culturally in ancient India, and probably I won't go into today. That is caste and class and family lineage. Those things were given priority. If a couple loved each other, it was assumed, okay, they're going to learn how to love each other sometime. But the idea of love was not important. And it's not surprising the Buddha did not universalize love. He talked about a lot of other things that were changeless. He talked about the changeless. He called it unborn, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. He talked about unconditioned, the undying, the unformed. He used many, many terms to refer to that which cannot be spoken. Universal love is another term. He didn't use it. But we do use others often here also. When we talk about consciousness or Buddha nature. By the way, Buddha nature was not used in Buddha's time. That came later. So at any rate, universal love. Buddha didn't talk about it, and this was one reason. Love was not a big deal in the same way that it is in our culture. And another reason, okay, so I'm going to say the Buddha's, if we took a look at the Buddha's, I'm on tender ground here, tentative ground, but if we take a look at his personality, if you want to say, he was more of an analytical type. I heard someone or read somewhere a long time ago, somebody who ventured out, and we don't want to go too far into this because the man was a spiritual giant. But to talk about it, we are living with the legacy of the fact that the way he taught was pretty analytical. Now, there were reasons for it because they didn't write at that time, and monks had to memorize it, and it helped to have these lists. But when we've got them these days, we've got lists and lists and lists, right? Some of you know that. Anyway, if you start reading the Buddhist literature, there are many, many lists. And that's why I think partly because he was analytical in nature, and also because this was the way that those who were going to carry on after him without writing could remember. But anyway, analytical, definitely not the poetry of love. That's my main point here. So I'm saying that universal love is embedded in the Buddhist tradition. And it's embedded, first of all, because it is intrinsic there in ways that I've just, I hope, explained. That is, it is referring to what cannot be spoken, but what is changeless. And the Buddha focused in his higher teachings on the changeless. On the introductory teachings, the first teachings, he talked about the various tools that we can use to reduce suffering. But he also talked about, which we don't usually pay that much attention to. I hate to call them ultimate because you could also think of them as the most foundational, but he talked about, changelessness. That's the whole point. Ultimately, how do we reduce suffering? We eliminate it, as he said, by experiencing that which is changeless, ultimately. Anything else is conditioned. The Buddha talked about all created things are conditional. And by created things, that's all plants, animals, and humans. We're created, we're born, we die. That's conditional. It's created. He also talked about the unconditioned, and that which never dies and wasn't born. So does that make clear the distinctions? So it was implicit then. All the times that the Buddha spent talking about the unconditioned, he could have just as easily been talking about, use the term universal love. So that is just a big point that I want to underscore. But the Buddha's life, also, a second reason and way, I think unconditional love, is exemplified in Buddhism was through his life and what he devoted his life to. And this was especially clear at the end of the Buddha's life. We think of him in these like godlike practically terms, although of course he wasn't, and he pointed that out time and again. He's a human being. He said, come along and find out what I know. But when we tend to think about the Buddha, God, it was so long ago and it seems so glorious. At the end of the Buddha's life, in fact, it was anything but glorious. Now, he had on his mission as teaching, he had received these support of many, many people in the community, lay people. They supported the Buddha's monastic community. The monastic community didn't work and didn't go out and get money. They were given money in exchange for the teaching. And in the Buddha's day, the support of rich and powerful people was as important as, let's face it, it is today in politics and in just about anything else. When the Buddha eventually died when he was 80. In his last decade, when he was in his 70s, growing somewhat more frail as the decade continued, he lost in his last decade of his life the support of the two most powerful kings in northern India at that time. One was the king of Magadha. His name was Bimbisara. He was a kind man, a deeply practiced man in Buddha's tradition, and a supporter of the Buddha. Well, his son, when he was elderly, he was about as old as the Buddha. When he was in his 70s, his son seized the throne, overturned his father's rule, and he had his father killed in a really gruesome way. It was a terrible story. But the upshot of that is that the Buddha lost the most powerful, largest kingdom, the support of the king there. I won't go on with the son. That's another story. The second loss was the king of Kosala, King Pasenadi, who was younger than the Buddha. Pasenadi had married one of the women who was sent to him from the Buddha's clan, the Sakyans. The Buddha was a Sakya, and the area, they were a republic of Sakya, was a client state of Kosala, of the big kingdom. So they were a vassal state. They resented being a vassal state. The Sakyans are fairly proud people. What they did, when the king of Kosala asked for them to send a woman to be his wife, because he wanted, let's not go into why he just asked it. They sent him a woman who was born of a slave. And they presented her as a noble. And the king did not know. He assumed that this woman was a noble woman. Lineage was enormously important. We could imagine, first of all, the Buddha knew who she was. He was a Sakyan. No secret to him. Can you imagine the kind of predicament that put him in? Here was this great teacher, wise speech, and here he knew that about this lie. And he knew that if he spoke about it and said who she was, she would probably be murdered. And who knew what else would happen. This secret, therefore, went on for 16 years. In year 16, painful years, you've got to say, for the Buddha, just can imagine what it was for him. Talk about dilemmas. We think we've got dilemmas sometimes. This is a huge dilemma. In the 16th year, the truth came out, and the son of the marriage of the king and the queen discovered that he had been born of a slave woman, that his mother was actually a slave. This was like explosive. When the king found out, he shut down the Buddha's monastic center, which was the greatest, biggest, most important monastic center of the Buddhists, all of them in northern India. It was a tremendous loss. But even more than that was afterwards, it must have been a couple of years perhaps, the prince who had been discovered that his mother was a slave, he attacked Sakya, the kingdom of Sakya. They were contiguous with each other. Sakya was to the north. The Buddha tried to stop the invasion. He was unsuccessful. And when the Kosalan army moved in there, and they slaughtered Sakyan nobles, that was the Buddha's family, just slaughtered then. And you can imagine the grief. I mean, it wasn't just one person, it was all of the nobles were slaughtered. And the kingdom, the capital city was destroyed. It was never rebuilt after that. It was so much destroyed. So there is, I think, a lot to take in here. And one thing is, when we think of the Buddha as an example, the Buddha continued teaching. He continued doing what he was doing, even though he faced these enormous setbacks. He was also getting sick. He had some kind of stomach ailment. He did not stop. I mean, this would be enough to stop anyone, I think, with the murder of all your family, the loss of the support, the weakening body. He continued on to the very end. And he didn't have to do that. So why did the Buddha continue on? I think he did it because of love. Love, the call, the deep call, the truth in what he was doing. Nothing was going to stop him. That was his life was devoted to that. It wasn't because he was getting well known or anything else. It was just for that. So I think that the Buddha really reflected this in his own life. And to me, that is a tremendous inspiration. Tremendous inspiration. So and what I think is that the Buddha represented love in action, something that every one of us can do in our own lives, in our own ways. So when we think about love and the sacredness of life, I think the Buddha was reflecting that. And we also can find it within within the tradition that we're practicing. Even if we don't talk, and he didn't certainly talk about sacredness, we do. And we can find it right in this tradition. So there is, I think, an invitation here when I wrap up this talk, an invitation to all of us that if you have that longing for what is sacred, if you feel a longing or this pull of love, it's there in this tradition. We don't have to, there's nothing wrong by looking somewhere else. I will say that, in fact, in this talk, and this evening, there are 3 different ways that we talked about or approached universal love. Number 1, the Sufi poets, the poets I read. Number 2, through that meditation, the breath of love. And now 3, more, I guess you'd say intellectually or through many more words. And what I'm saying in this talk, they're all words for the same thing that can't be spoken. And none of them conflict with each other. It's not like, oh, if you've got poetry, well, you can't be talking this. Yes, you do it all. Why not? You can't talk about it anyway. So all is fine. And I think that's the invitation for all of us. And, you know, it was so interesting to me. As I was finishing working on this talk, I came across a quote from the Buddha from his early teachings. He changed, I think, in the way he taught. And we've got his later teachings in enormously thick volumes of 1,000 pages here and 500 there. In his earlier teachings, they were much briefer. In one of the early teachings, which called the Sutta Nipata, he said this to his monks. He gave advice to his monks, and he said, "Let your love flow outward through the universe, to its height, its depth, its broad extent, a limitless love without hatred or enmity. Then, as you stand or walk, sit or lie down, as long as you're awake, try to be in touch with it with all your heart. Your life will bring heaven to earth." I love that. So different in tone from the other things. If any of you read any of the discourse, I mean, it's totally different. But this is, I think, is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, here is talking not about loving kindness, not about cultivating. He says, without breath, bring it from heaven and earth. And so this is universal love. So that's the invitation, I think, for all of us. Live this life of universal love daily. And that's not being up there and abstract, it's just letting it flow through you naturally in your daily life. And I thank you for listening. And the truth was, I'd hoped that we could have a conversation, because I think the conversations at the end are just really interesting when you are able to speak up. We can't. I know we can't even, I'd love to offer to stay later. I can't do that anyway, because I have, but we can't stay later. I thank you very much for being here and for listening. Yeah.